All right, who's not dead? Sound off.
A very important yet incredibly forgotten election is the one of 1992. Was often cited as a freeway race between, as I used to call it, a old Republican, a new Democrat, and a interesting independent. The race was an absolute blowout for incumbent George H.W. Bush, who, despite having the second highest approval rating of any US president, got absolutely destroyed in a landslide by Democratic challenger Bill Clinton and his VP Al Gore, who totally wiped the floor with Bush's VP Dan Quayle in the VP debates. Because of this utterly baffling upset and another one in 1996, Bill Clinton would be given the honors to lead America through the 1990s, which has undoubtedly changed modern America for ways of which I can't even begin to describe. Now, of course, this is all leading to the setup question. What if Bill Clinton never got into power? Or alternatively, what if Bush beat him instead? Now, this is decently harder than it seems. George H.W. Bush's 1992 campaign is rather infamous for being low energy and not really having anything. I mean, when you look at it, he didn't really introduce any policy ideas. He didn't capitalize on any successes like the Gulf War, which, by the way, his VP tried to do but failed. And more importantly, his line of attack against Clinton was just lackluster. Clinton was able to slam Bush because, well, he said, read my lips. While Bush, his response was more or less, you're not a big fan of America. Yeah, that didn't work out too well. There was also a secret factor that played into this, being the fact that Bush actually had Graves' disease while this thing was going on, which his wife also had. Graves' disease heavily affected this man's ability to campaign, and oh boy, does it show. Okay, so what are some key things we can do here in order to ensure Bush has a better shot at winning the White House? Well, I'll go over at least four that I think improve, not 100% give him a chance at winning, but at least improve his odds. The first thing I would like to do is for him to actually be able to capitalize off his successes, make ads and whatnot appear with generals like Colin Powell and Dick Cheney, highlight the fact that, they won the Gulf War, which gave Bush a 89% approval rating, 91 depending on who you ask, but actually capitalize off of your successes and turn it into good campaign material. The next thing I would like to do is just to remove his Graves' disease in order. I know it sounds cheap to remove it, but at the same time though, this thing is incredibly detrimental on anything he can do in terms of campaigning, as well as any remainder of a presidency he may have. And because I want him to live to see the end of his presidency, I'll remove Graves' disease, which shouldn't be too controversial since under the law of averages, it should not have struck in a husband and wife. One minor addition at the end I would like to tack on here is have Perot's poll be less so. Perot was pretty instrumental in the fall of Bush, as it is unclear how close the election would be had he just not entered the race at all. And when looking at the official vote count, it does seem like he pulled quite a proportional amount of votes away from Bush. So if we simply just, weaken his appeal, we can actually give Bush some sizable numbers. And hey, he'll likely win the popular vote. Now, in order for Bush to actually win this, he has to do the Herculean task of flipping at least 10 states to his column. That being Georgia, New Hampshire, Ohio, New Jersey, Montana, Kentucky, Colorado, Wisconsin, Louisiana, and Tennessee. All of which are going to be incredibly hard to do. But again, with an energized campaign actually attacking Clinton on his weak points, we have officially cemented Bush's victory, and with it, 16 years of Republican rule in the White House. So, how well does he do? First thing we need to tackle is the fact that, the Democrats would largely be in disarray following this loss. In the immediate aftermath, everyone, and I mean everyone, is completely shocked by this upset victory against Bill Clinton, and with it, the Democrats are now scrambling for, anything. Likely they are going to be setting their sights on the 1994 midterms. So while I won't be talking about them all too much, keep it in the back of your mind that the Democrats, for the majority of the time until I talk about them again, are going to be focused on rebuilding and aiming for the midterms and 1996 election. As for Bush himself, after getting re-inaugurated, what does he get done? Well, the first thing, of course, is, dealing with the new Congress. As stated over and over and over again in the 1992 debates, Bush made it pretty clear that as soon as he got back in, he was basically going to wrangle the new Congress in order to listen to what he's doing. Now, how successful this would be is really up to your own interpretation, but considering how, I imagine that the Democrats in Congress at the time would really not like to deal with a government shutdown, especially since it could really hammer their chances at the 1994 midterms, I do have a feeling that at least some communication goes through. Now, exactly what is said and how it goes down and what Bush is able to pass is a little hard to guess, but based off of, what he said in the 1992 debates, it is more or less standard conservative stuff. Cutting red tape for small businesses, cutting taxes, it's pretty much your average conservative. And let me tell you, H.W. Bush, is your pretty average conservative. Now, one big domestic issue around this time that, I can't really ignore is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. How exactly Bush handles this is a little up for grabs, but what I can say is that he is likely less enthusiastic about it than Clinton. Now, I'm not saying he's like a Ross Perot and would attempt to stop it from passing, but what I more or less mean is that with H.W. Bush in power instead, he is likely, less so enthusiastic about the North American Free Trade Agreement than Clinton was. Now, things seem pretty uneventful, that's kind of the point. From 1992 to 1993, Bush doesn't have a whole lot to worry about domestically. Well, he does have something to pique his interest, but that is more foreign policy-wise, but for the most part, it's pretty peaceful. Speaking of foreign policy, what about it? Now, I'm not exactly the biggest expert as to what Bush would do domestically. I am pretty knowledgeable as to what he would do foreign policy-wise, as foreign policy is this guy's bread and butter. Now, the first thing we need to tackle is the liberalization of the Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union, and expansion of NATO. How he would handle this is a little hard to say, but I do have a strong belief that he would push for further NATO expansion earlier than our timeline in order to secure the bloc. On top of that, I do believe that he would get along real nice with Boris Yeltsin. Bush, again, was an incredibly skilled diplomat. I do have a strong belief that him and Yeltsin could actually get along fine, and when it comes to pressing matters, i.e. Yugoslavia and NATO, the two could probably work something out. Speaking of Yugoslavia, what's the deal with it? Well, as said in the 1992 debate, Bush was more or less planning to implement a no-fly zone over Yugoslavian-controlled Bosnia. Now, I'm simply just going to take his word for this. So, Bush largely goes to the United Nations and comes with a, resolution to impose a no-fly zone over Yugoslavian-controlled Bosnia, and it passes. Now, this is a major damper to Yugoslavia and their campaign against Bosnia, Croatia, and Slovenia. And as a result, I do have a firm belief that Yugoslavia at some point is likely to break this no-fly zone. Repeatedly. And with it, Bush is likely forced to intervene. Seeing how the Yugoslavian government will not make peace and will not follow the UN resolution, I do find it likely that Bush's intervention is very similar to that of the NATO intervention into Kosovo in our timeline. With this going on, I find no reason to believe that the Bosnians would not attempt to, shake off the Yugoslavians during this time. With their military distracted by the intense bombing runs, the Bosnians do likely make some critical breakouts and do start threatening Serbian positions, and at worst, even encircle them inside Croatia. If the Serbian positions are encircled, then Serbia is in deep trouble, as the majority of their troops are surrounded by hostile terrain and either surrender on their own or just get completely destroyed. Combine that with the bombing runs at home, I find no reason to believe why the rest of Yugoslavia wouldn't start to disintegrate. Montenegro likely, silently leaves, and Kosovo may actually forcefully leave. As for what the specifics are about this peace, I don't know, but what I do know is that it does likely involve the Russians and the US, as well as, all the other warring factions. If you ask me, I do find it hard-pressed to not see a peace deal similar to the one we got take place, where Yugoslavia is pretty much broken up. Speaking of Russia, nukes, ICBMs. Bush and Yeltsin were actually pretty good with each other when it came to, destroying the nukes and ICBMs to ensure that, there wasn't going to be any nuclear war anytime soon. And with it, I do believe that these treaties would likely continue. And with it, Russia would be less paranoid about America and also have a lot less nukes, which I don't need to tell you is a good thing. However, I would be a fool to say that, all of Bush's attention is going to be focused at, Europe, as there are other matters. In Somalia and Rwanda, we find our next pair. As you know, in Somalia, the US got entangled in a quagmire, as a bit of a foreshadowing for things to come, and with it did suffer some very high casualties. And if you know anything about your history, you would know that this absolute disaster turned off Clinton from intervening in the Rwandan genocide. So it begs the question, would Bush do the same? And I find it more or less unlikely. Now, a popular online consensus I see is that Bush wouldn't intervene in Rwanda because Somalia went horribly, or because Rwanda had no strategic importance to the United States. But this isn't entirely true. The main reason why Clinton was turned off from intervening in Rwanda was because of a military operation that he authorized in Somalia that went horribly. This military operation, ordered by Clinton, was more or less to raid militia headquarters, and it completely backfired. And as a result, it turned off Clinton from intervening in the region. But Bush would take an entirely different approach to this whole situation. In the 1992 debate, Bush made it pretty evident that he was very hesitant to put boots on the ground, and the injections from President Clinton would likely be, drawn back. With this said, the US is likely not to implement as many troops as they did in our timeline, and with it, I do find it incredibly unlikely that Bush is going to be turned off of intervention. Now, don't get me wrong, Somalia is still in trouble. This country is one of the most luckless places I think I've ever seen in my life, and the chaos that Somalia inherited in the 90s is likely to persist as the UN attempts to nation build in the area. However, the US's sting via the operation to attempt to capture the militia leaders, which completely backfired, likely will not happen, and as a result, Bush is likely more privy to intervention in the areas. So of course, this does leave the question open: would Bush intervene in the Rwandan genocide? I do have a strong feeling that he would, as remember, the US doesn't get stung by the loss of troops in that operation, and more importantly, Bush's philosophy, which is more or less that the Western democracies were coming to dominate the world, would likely not stand for this act. The Hutu, the main perpetrators of it, are likely to be airstriked by George Bush. Considering the successes in Somalia and Yugoslavia, and not to mention his, philosophy, I do have a strong feeling that George H.W. Bush would at least conduct limited airstrikes. And with it, he would attempt to put an end to the whole crisis, which I do believe he likely could have. However, we need to take a step back, as you know that domestic thing I was alluding to earlier? Yeah, it's starting to rear its head. As you know, in 1993, the bombing of the World Trade Center would be conducted, and now we have an open question. How would Bush respond to this bombing, and would he be able to prevent 9/11 before it ever rears its head just a few years later? Now, one thing I do want to make clear here is that this bombing would most definitely catch the ire of Bush and his cabinet, who he would deploy to find out who's responsible for this. And later, when the news comes back that yes, it was most definitely Al Qaeda, Bush likely doesn't react the same way his son did. Now, while this bombing is really bad, and I do have a strong belief that Bush's cabinet would indeed use this as an excuse to crack down on terrorist groups within the Middle East, I do have a strong belief, however, that Bush would not do anything crazy like invade Afghanistan.
However, I do feel like he would commit to limited airstrikes on Al-Qaeda camps in retaliation, which would likely be met with open arms in his admin, as it sends a strong message to groups like these not to hit the US or else face the consequences. I have to use text-to-speech for this part, since my microphone is fucked and I can't afford to get a new one at the moment. Fuck me. Anyways, back to the alt list.
So, as we make it through the first few years of his presidency, now we reach some of the more important points, 1994, for two reasons. Domestic-wise, it was the year of the Republican Revolution, and depending on how things go, that might all change. Does the Republican Revolution of 1994 at all get affected? If you ask me, I do find it unlikely. See, while there are certain domestic issues that I do have a strong belief Bush would fall short in, and not to mention that Dan Quayle is more than likely to make some heavy gaffes, I do have a strong belief that Bush could levy these foreign policy successes and domestic recovery as, well, a heavy reason as to why you should vote the Republicans in the midterms. Bush won the Gulf War. He helped stabilize Eastern Europe, Somalia, Rwanda, helped go after the terrorists who attacked the World Trade Center, and most importantly, helped recover America from, well, its recession. And with it, I do have a strong belief that the Republican Revolution could actually go through in this timeline, though maybe a little lessened. See, while I can't predict specifics, what I do know is that with all of these successes building up for President Bush, I do have a strong feeling that unless he does something extremely unpopular, well, domestic-wise, he does likely have an easy gateway to get a Republican Senate and House in 1994. Again, while I don't know specifics and maybe the Republican Revolution is lessened, I see no reason why it should be prevented. And with it, I would even say that, well, Bush's sons, Jeb and W, also win their seats, meaning that both of the smaller Bushes each get their time in the governor seats. Now, with this midterm success, there are two immediate reactions. The first one is, well, doom and despair amongst the Democratic side, who would likely be incredibly disheartened by this. Bush was supposed to be an easy victory, but instead they got knocked out. These midterms they were at least expecting to hold on to, but instead they got a knockout punch again. And now, after this amazing success, the Republican primary field is starting to balloon. And as we approach election season, it's about time to figure out who's going to be fighting who, because Bush is out of terms, and 16 years of Republican rule could be upended right here, right now. Now, as for people who I don't think are running, from our timeline, I don't think Bob Dole is going to be running. He might, but I have heavy doubts. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Dole is, well, a nothing burger. He certainly has influence within the Republican Party, he's widely loved, and I do find it, well, hard to believe that he wouldn't at least be on someone's VP shortlist. But running himself, I do find it a little more unlikely, especially since if there are more energetic and, well, younger candidates in the race, he may actually drop out if he does decide to run. But for the sake of the scenario, I don't think he's running. As for the other few that I don't think are running, it would at least be the Bushes. While I do think Jeb might pick up the mantle and attempt to run, I don't think W would. He's more or less content with his, well, Texas governorship, and he even rejected to run in this timeline. Of course, this could be different, but I do have a stronger belief that having just become Texas governor, he would likely focus on that instead of, well, immediately jumping into the presidential race. Jeb does seem like he has that ambition in him, but again, I do find it unlikely that he is to win. Ditto the same issues with W. So then, who could run for the Republican nomination? Well, there are some obvious choices. Of course, Newt Gingrich, who I do suspect would run, especially with this widely successful Republican era. Dan Quayle did actually explore a committee to run, but never followed through. Ditto with Donald Rumsfeld, but in this timeline, with the massive success of the Bush administration and the ties they have with it, I do have a strong belief that they would actually declare their run for the Republican nomination. As for who else would run, I do have a strong suspicion that Pat Buchanan and Forbes would also run. They ran in our timeline and didn't do half bad, and there's nothing to make me believe that they wouldn't run in this timeline as well. Dick Cheney and Colin Powell are also choices to run, but I do have strong suspicions that they might not run. Dick Cheney, maybe, but if Donald Rumsfeld runs, I do find it likely that he just endorses him. And Colin Powell, well, everyone wanted Colin Powell to run. But again, considering how he denied it in our timeline, I don't believe he would run in this timeline either. As for other people who decide to, well, not declare their run for the Republican nomination, I don't really see a huge reason why this would be any different. Gerald Ford sure as hell wasn't going to run. Oliver North was just going to get absolutely butt-fucked by the Democratic candidate. And Donald Trump, who I didn't even know declined to run, was also there. So really, other than, well, who I've already listed, I can't really think of anyone else who would run that is very notable besides Alan Keyes, who would, well, likely run in this timeline as well. Now, as for the Democrats, I don't really know who they would nominate here. It is a bit of a wild ball. As, well, besides the leftovers from 1992, who I can't really predict the run, let alone win, because, well, let me tell you, if these people can't beat Bill Clinton, they likely aren't winning. On top of that, Bill Clinton himself might actually try another run. Well, of course, such a close election might actually hurt the man, because then his opponents can say, well, we tried Clinton and it didn't work. Clinton could then point to, look at this, it was an extremely slim margin that I lost by, so give it another shot against a weaker Republican candidate and I could probably win this thing. Al Gore is always a choice, but considering how he lost to fucking Dan Quayle of all people, I have heavy doubts that he would be able to secure the nomination without breaking any deals within the Democratic convention. Popular candidate within alternative history circles is Mario Cuomo, who I do feel like he would probably run and might actually gain a few votes, but I do have a strong belief that he just would not win. So it could actually be likely that in 1996 the Democrats try another crack with the Clintons. I don't really see anyone else who would be able to run that would actually be able to challenge Clinton besides Gore, and the other main people who are running, such as Gary Hart and Mario Cuomo, who declined to run in our timeline, but who might actually run in this timeline, I just simply don't see them beating Clinton here. Another popular person is Jay Rockefeller, but again, I just simply do not see him beating out Bill Clinton if he runs here. Bill Clinton does have a lot going for him here in this convention, and with it, it is likely that he might actually get the nomination. Again, I see Vittle who stand in the way of preventing him from getting the nomination, and he does have some wide successes to point to. Again, the only real person that could stop him from getting the nomination is Al Gore, but again, I do find it incredibly unlikely that he's going to be able to win. So, as for the Republican side, as to who they choose here, I don't entirely know. See, it is most definitely going to come down to a competition between Dan Quayle and Newt Gingrich. I don't find it likely that Donald Rumsfeld is going to be able to win the nomination, even though I'd like him to, and other people who would enter the race aren't likely to pull out a victory here. Now, between the two as to who I think would win, Newt Gingrich is the clear favorite here. Dan Quayle, even though he has the backing of the Bush presidency, is also still likely to make big gaffes with the media, and combined with that and the fact that Newt Gingrich is far more energetic and can weave around easily, I do find it way more likely that he does pull ahead of Quayle. So now our race is set, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton. Oh boy, is this one interesting. Now, before we can get into the war here, we have to get into the battle. who would be chosen to be their VPs? Well, for the Democratic side, I find it heavily unlikely it would be Al Gore again. Many people would stress the fact that Al Gore, who despite doing well in debates, mostly got bogged down by Quayle, and if he lost then, I do find it unlikely he is going to win again. So, who would Clinton choose? Well, I'm not too sure, but I do more or less lean towards Senator J. Rockefeller of West Virginia. Rockefeller is a mainstream experienced Democrat who could help Clinton with party leadership, as well as the fact that he could help him with the Appalachia region, which, assuming Clinton even wins just a few of the states he won last time, could easily lock down the election. The wealthy and well-connected Rockefeller could also help greatly with soothing over establishment Democrats who are more or less scared of giving Clinton, a perceived political outsider, another chance. Someone more experienced to help balance out the ticket, who could also help in more ways than one by heavily supplying the ticket with boatloads of cash, could actually go really well here. But who do the Republicans pick? Now, looking at the list here, there are quite a few choices. Jack Kemp is, well, the obvious choice and was our timeline's pick by Bob Dole. Bob Dole himself is always a choice. Colin Powell and Dick Cheney could always be chosen, and as a result are also extremely popular due to Bush's term. However, if they decline to run for president, I am a little weary on how they would feel about choosing to be vice president. It is really anyone's game as to how this would go down. However, I am more or less leaning towards Newt picking, Jack Kemp or Bob Dole. I should also mention John McCain of Arizona, who is likely to at least be on the short list. He is popular, he's moving, and, he is also incredibly well versed on foreign policy and could do great with people more or less concerned with that angle. However, considering how foreign issues aren't likely to be the focus of this campaign, since Bush is doing excellently on those, and there isn't really any big foreign crisis to exploit, I do find it more than likely that out of the power struggle, Jack Kemp eventually gets chosen to become the Republican vice presidential nominee. So our race is set. Greenwich Kemp versus Clinton Rockefeller. I should also mention the wild card of this election, which is Ross Perot. How exactly he goes about is a little hard to say. With Bush's more establishment-centric politics, I do find it hard to believe that Perot wouldn't run again, and hell, his appeal might even grow. But at the same time, with Bush's massive successes and the dominance of the Republican Party, I do find it unlikely that he would take away from any, Republican voters outside of people who are more or less focused on populistic policies. But considering how NAFTA is weakened, Perot doesn't really have many angles against it as he did in our timeline. So with the race set, who is to win this? In all honesty, I have absolutely no idea. These two are extremely good candidates facing off against each other who both have equally good VPs. As for who wins this, it's really anyone's game. Greenwich is coming in off of a widely successful Reagan-Bush term, and Clinton is striking back with a Democratic base determined on taking back the White House no matter what. Not to mention, his charm and media appeal does actually do him a lot of good here. Both of them do likely receive endorsements of their big party nominees, Bush for Greenwich, Quayle for Greenwich. Clinton also likely receives nominations from big stuff within the Democratic Party like the Rainbow Coalition. Plus, with the previously mentioned Rockefeller wealth that Rockefeller has, he could easily pour in billions into this campaign and get it all over TV, which is always an advantage. So really, who is to win this? Now, this is an incredibly good matchup, but one thing I've learned about history is that sometimes it just operates on luck. And what better way to test that out than with a coin toss? I have decided the sides. Heads will go to Clinton, and tails will go to Greenwich. Head! Congratulations, Bill Clinton and Jay Rockefeller. You officially become the next two presidents of the United States. Now, you may be saying, what a bunch of pointless fluff. All we did is just delay Clinton's term in office. But not really. Significant changes have been made to the world now that Clinton's gone, and now that he's in, I find it heavily unlikely that anything that resembles his term is going to be recognizable, not to mention the very real possibility that he is only a one-term president in this timeline. Not to mention, I can't even begin to dig into how the other sectors of the world have been affected by a second Bush presidency. I haven't brought it up yet, but Asia as a whole is likely more timid. Bush was a decent fan of the Chinese, seeing his sympathies for Deng Xiaoping. Not to mention, China's leader in the 90s had a pretty rocky relationship with Bill Clinton that peaked in hatred around the Chinese embassy bombing when, Clinton was bombing Kosovo. However, not only does that not happen because the US and China are in decent terms considering Bush's foreign policy, but also Yugoslavia was primarily dissolved earlier. Not to mention, the amount of domestic stuff that would have changed is utterly mind-boggling. Hell, the domestic situation as a whole is likely completely different, and I can't really nail it specifically, but what I do know is that stuff like the Waco siege, the Oklahoma City bombing, are likely changed because Bush got in. How they are though, I don't know. I do largely expect Clinton to be more of a domestic-focused president, trying to get what he missed out on in 1992 done. Clinton only has a few years to chill out before eventually he's going to have to face his challenger for the 2000 election. Who does Clinton face for his 2000 election bid? Well, it is decently hard to say. I can make a decent few guesses. The primary three being Jeb Bush, George W. Bush, and Dan Quayle. Now, while Quayle did lose in 1996, he did actually explore a committee to run in 2000, however later on dropped out, and I have no reason to believe why that would change here. Jeb Bush didn't run in our timeline, but considering the Bush family's ambitions, I do at least expect him to run early on. And then of course we have our timeline's winner, George W. Bush, who I do also expect to run for a similar reason, which will either prop Jeb to drop out, or maybe Jeb will convince George to drop out. It's really anyone's game as to what happens here. I'll say that Jeb runs, but then later Bush runs, the other Bush, and with it, Jeb drops out to endorse his brother. The race is set. It's Bush v. Clinton for 2000. Who ends up winning? It's a very hard guess here. Both of them are extremely good and have extremely good attributes. Now, because of how hard it's getting to predict a solid winner, I'll instead give two mostly vague scenarios about what would happen if either one won. In a scenario where Clinton would win, I find it pretty hard to imagine that he would mostly do anything different than, his second term. It would mostly be cool and steady until 2001, and then the foreign policy becomes the main attribute of his campaign. While he does that, I do largely expect him to focus on Afghanistan, and with it, I can expect the international response to be far more unified. So overall, Clinton does likely focus on Afghanistan in his second term, only for the 2004 election to come up, and it could potentially change that. As for who runs, I have no idea, but what I do know is that the Republican and Democratic nominations are going to be wildly different. There is no Al Gore. I do find it likely that maybe John Kerry could get it, but even that might be a bit of a stretch. And as for the Republicans, that gets even harder to predict since I frankly have absolutely no idea who would run. So at the end of the day, we've more or less just delayed a Clinton term, but thrown him in the middle of one of the biggest international crises of all time. But as for where that goes, I don't know. In a scenario where Bush ends up winning, and in case you're wondering, I find it unlikely he would change his VP choice, so I'll just keep it as Cheney. I do find it more likely that something akin to our timeline could go down, which does allow for some interesting butterflies. The lack of Gore and Clinton could mean that there are serious issues for the Democrats in 2004 and 2008. In 2004, I again, do find it likely that John Kerry could probably squeeze out a victory here, but at the same time, nothing is for certain. In case he doesn't get the nomination and instead someone else does, whoever that may be, I have no idea what would go down. But what I do know is that Obama likely wouldn't be selected to speak at the 2004 DNC, and with it, his ability to win the 2008 Democratic primary is likely butterflied away since he just isn't that notable. Speaking of 2008, assuming most of the domestic issues in the US follow up the same way, as for who follows, I don't know. John McCain could probably get the nomination. However, as for who gets the Democratic nomination, I really don't know. Hillary Clinton herself may not ever actually be able to get the nomination since Clinton is far less notable and is also far less popular. And with it, if she does run, I do find it, again, likely that she doesn't win. The majority of Democratic opponents from our timeline likely are either butterflied away or just don't run. As for who runs and who wins, I have absolutely no idea. At the end of the day, however, it is truly impossible for me to make any modern day guesses as to what ends up happening. This is more or less easier for more modern day scenarios, and trust me, I got a few of those in the pipeline, so expect some juicy content out of those. But for the most part, had Bush won instead of Clinton, our timeline would have been radically different. But regardless, I had a lot of fun making this. Anyways, I'll see y'all later.